Napoleon Bonaparte, one of history's most formidable military leaders and emperors, cast a long shadow over Europe. His influence shaped the course of nations, and his legacy continues to be studied and admired. Yet, behind the scenes of his glorious rise and eventual fall, there was a woman who lived a life just as dramatic, albeit in a very different way. Pauline Bonaparte, Napoleon's younger sister, was a figure of immense beauty, scandal, and intrigue, a woman who defied the constraints of her time and whose life was as turbulent as her brother's reign. Born in 1780 in Corsica, Pauline was the fifth of Napoleon's siblings, and it didn't take long for her beauty to become a defining characteristic. Even as a young girl, she turned heads, and her striking looks were the subject of much admiration and gossip. However, unlike her brother, who was driven by ambition and military strategy, Pauline's passions lay elsewhere, namely in love, luxury, and independence. From the very beginning, she was a woman unafraid to live life on her own terms, which set the stage for a life filled with romance, scandal, and controversy. At the age of 17, Pauline was married off to Charles Leclerc, a French general, in 1797. The marriage, while presented as a romantic union, was more of a strategic alliance designed to strengthen the Bonaparte family's position within the military elite. Despite the political nature of their relationship, the marriage was not without its own emotional dynamics. Pauline and Leclerc's bond was never one of complete loyalty or devotion. Whispers of Pauline's infidelities began to circulate, especially during her husband's military campaign in the Caribbean. Her flirtations with various officers and even artists became the subject of gossip in Parisian society, setting the stage for her reputation as a woman of unshakable independence and unrelenting passion. When her husband died of yellow fever in 1802, Pauline's status as a widow gave her the freedom to explore life outside the rigid constraints of marriage. Pauline returned to Paris, and with her return, the French capital was swept into the spectacle of her bold, lavish lifestyle. The widow Pauline was no longer the young, dutiful wife but a free-spirited woman who reveled in the pleasures of life. Parisian society watched, fascinated and scandalized, as she threw herself into extravagant parties, pursued numerous romantic affairs, and flaunted her beauty. Pauline's flirtations were legendary. Her lovers ranged from artists to political figures, each relationship further cementing her reputation as the epitome of grace and scandal. Pauline's beauty was not just the stuff of rumor, it was immortalized by the famed sculptor Antonio Canova, who created a marble statue of her in the guise of Venus Victrix. The statue captured Pauline in a moment of classical beauty, yet the very act of its creation only fueled the rumors surrounding her life. In many ways, the statue became a symbol of Pauline's complex character. She was both adored and criticized, a woman who embodied the ideal of feminine beauty while also living a life that defied societal expectations. In 1803, Pauline's life took another turn when she married Camillo Borghese, an Italian prince, further elevating her status in European society. Though this marriage granted her the title of a princess, it was far from a blissful union. Pauline's marriage to Camillo was not one built on love or compatibility. Instead, it was yet another strategic match, designed to solidify the Bonaparte family's influence in Italy. However, Pauline's lavish spending and continued flirtations with men from all walks of life caused constant friction between her and her husband. The marriage remained more a matter of social status than emotional connection, with Pauline's independence and refusal to be confined to a traditional role of wife and princess continuing to stir controversy. Despite the tension in her marriage, Pauline used her position as a member of the aristocracy to further her own ambitions. She hosted grand gatherings, formed influential connections, and used her beauty and charm to move through the circles of European high society. Her life became a series of adventures, romantic, artistic, and political. Pauline was also fiercely loyal to her family, particularly her brother Napoleon. When he was exiled to the island of Elba in 1814, Pauline was the only sibling to visit him. She sold her jewels to fund his living expenses and provided him with much-needed emotional support during a time when many had abandoned him. This gesture of loyalty showed a different side of Pauline, one that was deeply connected to her family, despite her public image as a woman driven by self-interest. Yet, beneath the outward glamour of her life, Pauline's health began to deteriorate. She was diagnosed with tuberculosis, and in the final years of her life, she withdrew from the public eye. She retreated to Rome, where she lived quietly in her later years, still living in the lap of luxury but now increasingly frail. Pauline's death in 1825, at the age of 44, marked the end of a tumultuous life. She left behind a legacy that was just as complicated as her persona, a woman of striking beauty, bold ambitions, and passionate love affairs, but also a woman of profound loyalty and strength, especially toward her family. Pauline Bonaparte was never one to be bound by the conventions of her time. She lived as she saw fit, pursuing beauty, love, and luxury without shame or apology. She was a woman ahead of her time, unafraid to step into the limelight, unafraid to love boldly, and unafraid to scandalize the world around her. Her life remains an enduring testament to the complexities of human nature, showcasing how one can be both the object of admiration and the subject of scandal. In the end, Pauline's life proves that history's most captivating figures are often the ones who break the mold, daring to live a life that is truly their own.